It's important, as I interpret the sayings of Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas, it's important to understand, to all you listeners, that unless you are of a certain spiritual maturity level, these interpretations will not likely resonate with you. However, you may still get something out of these interpretations by listening to them. As with all conscious thought, we must be at that level of consciousness for these thoughts to resonate with us. If we are not at that level of understanding, we don't vibe with what the speaker is saying. We don't see the world as the speaker sees it. There is no right or wrong. You're not wrong and I'm not right. It's simply a different interpretation for a different level of understanding. And if you find that these interpretations do not vibe with you, you are quite likely not ready for this level of understanding, but you're on your way, and eventually you will see it as I have seen it. Eventually you will be at my spiritual level, and you will see the world, your conscious, through your consciousness as I see it, and you will vibe with my vibe, and you will accept the things that I am saying. Gospel of Thomas, saying number 17. Jesus said, I shall give you what no eye has seen, and what no ear has heard, and what no hand has touched, and what has never occurred to the human mind. What Jesus is saying here is his knowledge, his wisdom, his understanding is above the level of what human beings can comprehend. The human consciousness cannot see spiritual things. In our mind, when we have an understanding, we create an image in our mind of what that understanding is. We have a picture in our mind, and we say, oh, yes, I converted that understanding into an image, and I see what that means. But Jesus said, the words he speaks, the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that he gives is above the human mind's capability to create an image. We seen earlier in one of the earlier sayings in the gospel that Jesus had asked his disciples, Peter and Thomas and Matthew, what they thought he was like. And both Peter and Matthew created an image. Peter had an image in his mind that Jesus was like a righteous angel. Matthew had an image in his mind that Jesus was a philosopher. But Thomas had no image. This is what it means to die to your own understanding, to take what you know or think you know and get rid of it. Once you've ascended to a level where you are above what you think you know, when you have died to what you think you know, then like Thomas, you can't create an image of what Jesus is. You don't know. You used to have an image of what Jesus was, but you died to that, and now you do not know what Jesus is. As Thomas just didn't know, and Jesus took Thomas aside then, because he was ready to understand. As long as we are creating an image of what we think things are, then we are not ready to understand the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that comes from we need to die to our own understanding, to the point where we do not know what Jesus is. Then we are ready to understand. And this is what Jesus says, I shall give you what no eye has seen, and what no ear has heard, and what no hand has touched, and what has never occurred in the human mind. Because Jesus speaks wisdom that is above what human beings' level of consciousness can comprehend. You must die to what you know or think you know, ascend above the level of the human's consciousness, and then you will see clearly what Jesus means. Gospel of Thomas, saying 18. The disciples said to Jesus, tell us how our end will be. Jesus said, have you discovered then the beginning? That you look for the end? For where the beginning is, there will the end be. Blessed is he who will take his place in the beginning. He will know the end and will not experience death. Well, I've just told you in the preceding saying, the beginning is when you are ready to give up what you know or think you know. All your life you've understood carnal understandings of Jesus, who he is, of what God is. You have to forget about all that. You have to clean the slate of your consciousness. You clean the slate of your mind. Take what you know or think you know and get rid of it. When you are ready to do that, when you become like Thomas and say in your prayers to the Lord, I don't know what you are, Lord. I have no image of what you could be. I'm unable to understand. I have no understanding of what you are. That is the beginning. It is written in the Proverbs by Solomon himself that wisdom, the fear of the Lord, is the beginning of all wisdom. When we fear the Lord, we do his commandments. And he has commanded us to take what we know or think we know about him and forget about it. Become nothing. We are only what we think we are. It's our thoughts who create what we believe we are. When we take our thoughts that have formed who we believe we are and we get rid of them, then we become nothing. Whatever we believed ourselves to be, we become nothing if we take what we know and think we know. We are no longer who we were. We have died to who we were, because what we believed ourselves to be, we no longer believe that. Hence, what we believe Jesus to be, what we believe God to be, what we believe heaven to be, what we believe hell to be, we must take what we think we know in this lower level of understanding, this carnal level of consciousness, and get rid of it. We must come to the point where we realize that we know nothing. This is commanded of God. And when you fear God enough to do his commandments, then this is the beginning of wisdom. And this is the beginning. This is the beginning of salvation. The first commandment of Moses was love thy Lord God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. When you love God that much, you do his commandments. Jesus told you again in other places, he it is who loves me, he does my commandments. Love is the force that draws. When you love something, you're drawn to it. If you love money, if you love reputation, if you love the things of this world, you're drawn to the things of this world by your love for them. When you love God, who is above the things of this world, you turned away from the things of this world and you are drawn towards God. This is the beginning. When you have taken your place in the beginning by fulfilling the first commandment, then you may look for the end. But as Jesus says, where the beginning is, there is the end also, because God is the first and the last. He's the beginning and the end. When you love God and turn from the things of this world and seek God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, then that is the beginning. And that is the end. The beginning of God is the end of you. And of course, God is eternal. So once you come into God, there is no end. So the beginning and the end are all one in the eternal realm. Saying 19 in the Gospel of Thomas. Jesus said, "Blessed is he who came into being before he came into being. If you become my disciples and listen to my words, these stones will minister to you. For there are 5 trees for you in paradise, which remain undisturbed summer and winter, and whose leaves do not fall. Whoever becomes acquainted with them will not experience death." Jesus is saying, blessed is he who came into being before he came into being. Jesus has mentioned 2 beings here. The first being is something comes into existence. The second being is something comes into your human beingness, your consciousness. So Jesus says, blessed is he who came into being. Now, he is an understanding. Males are understandings, always. In the Holy Scriptures, male depicts understanding. So, blessed is the understanding that was created, came into being, before it came into the human being. Because the understanding that was created, that came into being, is pure. It's spiritual. It's untampered with. It's of God. But when it comes into the human consciousness, the human being, humans have to twist it, contort it to their own understanding. And they kill it. The life in it is taken out of it. It becomes dead. So blessed always means the blessing of God. And the blessing of God is God's light. God is light. And when he blesses you, he shares his light with you. So blessed is the understanding. So God is spirit. Spirit is light. So in the light, in the spirit, is the understanding that was created, came into being, before it came into the human carnal being and was twisted and contorted and made to something that the lower conscious level of the human being could imagine. And once human beings have twisted it to something that they can imagine in their mind's eye, it is dead. They've taken the spiritual understanding that was too high for them to comprehend, twisted it, brought it down to a lower level where they could understand it and create an image of it. And it's no longer blessed. It's lost its life. It's lost its light. It's not spiritual now. It's carnal. That's what Jesus is saying there. If you become my disciples, he said, truly, If you become a follower of Jesus, who is wisdom, knowledge, and understanding at a higher level than human. And we talked about creating the man. You've seen that we follow Moses through the wilderness. And when we've accomplished all that Moses' teachings can give us, we're known as the Lion of Judah, the first face of the beast of man. Then we eat out of the manger where the Christ child is brought forth. This is spiritual wisdom, knowledge, understanding begins to come forth. We eat of that. And then we become to the level, our understanding increases to the level that God considers a man. Now Christ is above men. If you're below the level of what God considers a man. Now remember, in Genesis, God created man and breathed the breath of life into him. This is a little bit of God's light. So man has the light of God, a bit of it. So until you have the light of God, you are not a man. Your understanding is not at the level of a man in God's eyes. You're below that. But Christ came to preach to the men. For we live in a universe where like is attracted to like. That is a universal law. It could never change. Unless you share something in common with another, you will not be attracted to them. And that thing that we share in common is usually thought energy, conscious energy, the energy of your vibration. When you vibe at a certain level, you seem to be attracted to many others with that mode of thinking at that same level. Well, in order to become a disciple of Jesus, you must be at a certain level. You must share something in common with Jesus. You must have the breath of life from God and be at the level, your consciousness must be at the level of what God considers a man as Adam. At that level, then you have a little bit of the light of God, the breath of life. And Christ, then, his energy, which is of God, is like the breath of life in you, in your consciousness, and the two of you will connect. This is how Christ, Jesus, comes to gather disciples. You first have to have the breath of life. Then you will be attracted to the light of Christ, and you will be his disciple. And he says, if you become my disciples and listen to my words, these stones, we talked about this earlier, stones are truth. These stones will minister unto you. You will see these truths that are referred to as stones. You will see them at a higher level, and you will understand what they truly mean. They will minister unto you. For there are 5 trees in paradise. Trees are understandings as well. There are 5 understandings, but they are huge understandings that grow out of a good foundation and have many branches. Yes, just like a computer file system, you have trees of understanding. There are 5 in paradise. That's because in order to reach the light of paradise, there are 5 levels of understanding one must travel through. And you must gain spirituality through these 5 levels, each known as a tree. And then in the 5th level, you actually contact the light of God, known as paradise. In some of the ancient writings, Adam and Eve were told by God that they could, after they fell from paradise, they were kicked out of the garden, they could not re-enter paradise for what is stated 5,500 years. That is actually 5.5 chakra level, or the 5 trees. You have to ascend back up to 5 levels of understanding, and at the 5.5 level you can re-enter paradise. These are the 5 trees in paradise. By the time you make it to the light of God, enter his garden? There are 5 levels of understanding. These are the 5 trees in paradise. And they are eternal wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that each one of us has gathered by that point. We've gathered that. And we've gathered that much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding from the spiritual realm that we have raised our consciousness to that level where it's able to contact the light. These are the 5 trees of understanding in paradise, and they are eternal. They do not change. God doesn't change. Neither do these levels of understanding. These ones that have allowed you to reach the light of God, they are eternal. They do not change as God does not change. They do not lose their leaves. Leaves are the understandings that come out of the branches of the main stalk of the tree. But these understandings, even in the slightest amount, like a leaf, do not change. They do not change. Not in winter, not in summer. They don't change at all, because the understandings of God, the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of God does not change. It is written, I am the Lord, I change not. It is written in the Christian Bible, Jesus Christ, the same, yesterday, today, and forever. God does not change. And by the time you reach the light and are able to enter into the garden of God, there are 5 levels of understanding within your consciousness that you've accumulated over the years, over the lifetimes, that do not change. Whoever will be acquainted with them will become eternal. And you all will, at some point in your journey, you will become acquainted with them and you will become eternal. How quick? Depends on your love for God. If you have love for this world above love for God, then it'll take you longer. Some of you are older in your soul life, and you're fed up with the things of this world. You're ready to start walking away, turning away, leaving it, and seeking more towards God. Your love for God is growing. And some of you have reached a point in your soul life where you're fed up with this world. You're done with it, and you want to seek God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. If you do that, as Jesus said, he who seeks will find. However, he also says when you find, you will be troubled, because everything you thought about God and Jesus, you will discover was not true, and that God has a lot of cleaning up to do in your consciousness before you're pure enough to dwell in his light eternally. Gospel of Thomas, saying 20. The disciples said to Jesus, tell us what the kingdom of heaven is like. He said to them, it is like a mustard seed. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it falls on tilled soil, it produces a great plant and becomes a shelter for the birds of the sky. Now what Jesus is telling the disciples here, who want to know what the kingdom of heaven is like, Jesus said to them, it's like a mustard seed. God is progressive. You take a little spark, a little spiritual understanding, and if your heart is right, if you truly love God and love these spiritual understandings, it will grow progressively. Every thought dies. Every understanding of your own dies. It is appointed unto men. These are your understandings in your consciousness. Each one will die in its own time. And if your heart's right, it will be converted into a spiritual understanding. And that mustard seed grows into a huge tree, a huge stalk, a huge tree. These are the trees that were in paradise. This is how they started. A little spark of understanding, spiritual understanding. But if your heart is right and you seek God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength, that mustard seed will grow into a huge plant or a huge tree. And it will become so large. But it has to fall on tilled soil. This is a consciousness that is ready to receive the seed of God's spiritual understandings. This is the heart that is ready to give up everything. Many of the parables in the Christian Bible from Jesus tell you of a man. Always a man. You know what a man is now if you studied these. A man is a certain level of understanding. And a man finds a pearl hidden in a field, or a treasure hidden in a field, and he goes and gets rid of everything he has to purchase that one pearl. This is tilled soil. This is where you need to be. You have to be willing to part with everything you've got. This is your own understanding. It's not your house and your car and your wife and your kids. It's your understandings. You must depart with every one of these low understandings that you have so that they can be converted. You can't put new wine in an old vessel. The old vessel is your understanding. It will not accept the new understanding. The old one must die first. Then when you have no understanding, as Thomas earlier told Jesus in this Gospel of Thomas, I have no understanding of what you are. I can't explain it. I don't know what you are. Then you are ready to accept the new wine, the new understanding. So this is the tilled soil. The consciousness must be prepared by first getting rid of what you know or think you know. Get rid of it. But it is progressive. Each understanding in his own time. One at a time, your understandings will be converted, and this mustard seed, as they are converted, will grow into a huge tree. This is the progression of God in each and every consciousness. Now, Jesus says that it produces a great plant or a great tree and becomes shelter for the birds of the sky. You will know that in the carnal realm, if we read the Christian scriptures, there are lots of birds flying around. These are lower carnal things, from the raven and the dove that Noah sent out of the ark to other forms of birds, some clean, some unclean. But birds are little rays of enlightenment that fly around in your consciousness when you're carnal. Now, there are some unclean birds that are demonic. They're devilish. They will never ascend into the heavens. But there are some clean birds, like the dove, that can be converted to spiritual understanding. And if your heart is right, if the soil is prepared properly, if your consciousness is ready, then these birds will nest in this huge tree of understanding that you've created. And that means that you'll understand what that bird means spiritually. It will nest in that tree that you've created. Now, these birds will be clean birds like the dove, not darkened birds like the raven. Okay, and we see in the Old Testament that after Elijah prophesied against Ahab and Jezebel, he ran for his life, and he got depressed, and he went and lived by a brook, and the ravens fed him. These are darkened understandings, carnal understandings. These birds, these ravens that fed Elijah. This is why Noah sent out first the raven, because the whole story of Noah is a parable to show how the mind, the consciousness, ascends into the light. There's some rough seas to go through. This is what Jesus said, that you must seek until you find, and when you find, you'll be troubled. The rough sea that Noah was on. And the rain that came down was spiritual understanding that he gained. But at first he looked for land. He sent out a raven. These were dark birds, still carnal. But eventually he was able to send out a dove. a bird that bordered on spirituality, and that dove found land. Okay? This is the Gospel of Thomas. We're not going to get into the King James Bible, but you get the idea. Gospel of Thomas, saying number 21. Mary said to Jesus, "Who are your disciples like?" He said, "They are like children who have settled in a field which is not theirs. When the owners of the field came, they will say, when the owners of the field come, they will say, 'Let us have back our field.' They will undress in their presence in order to let them have back their field and to give it back to them. Therefore I say, if the owner of the house knows that the thief is coming, he will begin his vigil before he comes and will not let him dig through into his house of his domain to carry away his goods. You then, be on your guard against the world. Arm yourselves with great strength, lest the robbers find a way to come to you. For the difficulty which you expect will surely materialize. Let there be among you a man of understanding. When the grain ripened, he came quickly with his sickle in his hand and reaped it. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying." Mary is the desire for God that brings forth the Christ child. Okay, remember we talked about after you've been obedient with Moses' law and the prophets in the first covenant, when you can gain no more understanding carnally through Moses and the prophets, through your obedience, you become the Lion of Judah, the law keeper to the best of your ability. The next step, that is the first face of the beast of man that stands before the throne of God, meaning that man is a beast. Yet, he stands before the throne of God. But the first phase of that beast that stands before the throne of God is considered the Lion of Judah, the law keeper. Not a very righteous individual, because he does keep the law to the best of his ability, but the law is never kept perfectly, and therefore there's no salvation at that level. Then we develop a desire for the things of God. And we begin to eat out of the manger of Christ. Now we talked about love. Love and desire are synonymous. For what you love, you desire. What you desire, you love. Our desire that brings us to the babe, to the infant babe of Christ consciousness is Mary. Mary is the mother, the woman, the desire we have that brings forth the Christ child in our consciousness. So this is the Mary that's asking Jesus, "What are your disciples like?" And he said, "They are like children that have settled in a field. It is appointed unto men once to die." But that is referred to as becoming like a child again, being born again. When you take what you know or think you know, your man, that level of understanding, and you die to that level of understanding, you're born again as a child. So Jesus' disciples become like children. Children are innocent. They have not formed opinions and images of the way things are being. So Jesus is saying, you must become like this. Become like a child. Take what you know or think you know, get rid of it. Be like a child, so that I may be able to teach you something. I you something if you think you already know? So my disciples are like children. They've gotten rid of what they think they know and become like a child again. And they have settled in a field. A field is a headspace, a level of consciousness. But it's not theirs. It's a foreign land. Once you die to what you think you know, and you become like a child again, you're in a foreign headspace. You've never experienced that headspace before. It's a field that is not yours. When the owners of the field come, they will say, let us have back our field. And they will undress in their presence in order to let them have back their field and give it back to them. What Jesus is saying, when the children, when your thoughts become like children again and become the disciples of Christ, you'll be in a foreign headspace, a land, a field that you're not well acquainted with. It might even be uncomfortable for you. And those that do dwell in that land, those thoughts and understandings that dwell there, they will be at odds with the disciples of Christ. They'll say, get out of our land. Let us have back our place. You don't belong here. And the children will undress in their presence in order to let them have back their field. Now, this undressing of the children is again taking more of what you thought you were. We are always dressed in our thoughts and understandings. This is what we are. We are consciousness, conscious energy, and our dress is made up of our understanding. You may remember that Jesus, when he was crucified, he had a vesture that they did not want to tear apart or rend. So they cast lots for it. And that vesture was woven in one piece from the top down. That vesture was what Jesus wore. That was the light of God. Woven from the top down in one piece. Now, many of the saints were dressed in fine linen, which is the righteousness of the saints. Righteousness is your thoughts. Whiter the linen, the more pure and clean your thoughts. So these children aren't pure yet. They have died to what they know or think they know and become like children again, but they are not purified. They still have thoughts that aren't able to enter the kingdom of heaven. So they undress to give back to these thoughts that came and said, let us have back this field. It's a foreign land to them. Whatever they dressed themselves in to bring themselves into that field that's not theirs, they are prepared to take that off and give back the field, the headspace. Get out of that headspace. They will undress in their presence in order to let them have back their field and to give it back to them. The field is an area of understanding. And what brings us into an area of understanding is our thoughts. But if we're not comfortable in that area, then we undress. We take off those thoughts that brought us there. Therefore, I say, if the owner of the house, again, a house is a headspace, okay? In your consciousness, you have many houses. Jesus told in the Holy Scriptures that in my Father's house are many mansions. Okay? the Father's house is the light of God, and there are many different headspaces inside that light of God. Now here we say, Jesus says, if the owner of the house knows that the thief is coming, he will begin his vigil before he comes and will not let him dig through into his house of his domain to carry away his goods. What Jesus is saying is his disciples, they are vigilant. They watch for carnal thoughts that will try to enter in to their headspace. These carnal thoughts will come to them because they're recently converts. The disciples of Jesus are converts from carnal into spiritual. They're not comfortable in spiritual because they're not well acquainted with it, and many carnal thoughts come to them yet. And if they don't watch, these carnal thoughts may deceive them and lead them back to carnality. These are the thieves that come to steal. The disciples of Christ are vigilant. They watch. They watch for the thief that might be come to steal. You then be on your guard against the world. The world is the lower carnal consciousness. The world is not the kingdom of heaven. As Jesus said to Pilate, when Pilate was pronouncing the guilt sentence upon him, Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. The kingdom of heaven belongs to Christ. It is above. It's a conscious level above this world. This world that people function in is carnal. It's filled with thoughts that are below the level of heaven. So Jesus is talking about that carnal world here. He's saying, you then be a guard against the world. That's the thoughts of the world. Most human beings are in that world. That world is filled with darkened understandings of the Lord, God, and heavenly things. Be on your guard against that. Don't let those carnal thoughts enter in and rob you of your spirituality. Arm yourselves with great strength, lest the robbers find a way to come to you. Okay, arm yourself with great strength means get more spiritual knowledge. This is what strengthens you. The more spiritual knowledge you get, the stronger you grow. Arm yourself with more spiritual knowledge, lest the robbers, the carnal thoughts, find a way to come into your consciousness. For the difficulty which you expect will surely materialize. What Jesus is saying to people that are his disciples, that there is a transformation that has to take place from the carnal to the spiritual. You willingly die to your carnal understanding. You take what you know or think you know, you get rid of it, and you become like a child again, where Jesus can teach you, but there will be a huge battle. This is known as Armageddon. This is the battle to end all battles. The transformation from your carnality into spirituality is Armageddon, the war to end all wars, and the difficulty that you expect will surely materialize. You must seek until you find, and when you find, you will be troubled. This is the trouble. Let there be among you a man of understanding. Let there be in your thoughts, in your consciousness dwell many thoughts, thousands. But he's saying, let there be one thought at the level of a man who understands what I am saying. When the grain ripened, he came quickly with his sickle in his hand and reaped it. Now, if we look at Revelations, we see that Jesus is the one who reaps once the fruit is ripe. The angels do some reaping as well, but Christ comes with his sickle and reaps it. So what we're saying is, when your understanding is enlightened, is high enough that it is acceptable to Christ or God, then it is accepted. So as soon as your understanding of a certain issue rises up, ascends up to the light of Christ, to the same level of understanding that Christ has, it is immediately accepted into the kingdom. This is the transformation process. One thought at a time. We die to our thought. We become like a child again in that area. We protect ourselves from turning back to carnality. We fight the battle. And when our understanding is spiritual enough, when it's been converted, enlightened enough, when it becomes high enough level of understanding, it automatically is attracted to the light of Christ through the law of attraction. Like is attracted to like, and it clings to the heavenly realm. It passes into the heavens. Eventually, through this process, you go from receiving, a man goes from receiving the breath of life from God to dying to himself, becoming a child again, and each man in his own order, to the point that that breath of life becomes a bright light that's over your consciousness 24/7. Quite an elaboration on 21 there. 22. Jesus saw infants being suckled. He said unto his disciples, these infants being suckled are like those who enter the kingdom. They said to him, shall we then, as children, enter the kingdom? Jesus said to them, when you make the two one, and when you make the inside like the outside, and the outside like the inside, and the above like the below, and when you make the male and the female one and the same, so that the male not be male, nor the female. And when you fashion eyes in the place of an eye, and a hand in the place of a hand, and a foot in the place of a foot, and a likeness in the place of a likeness, then will you enter the kingdom. What Jesus is saying here in saying 22, he saw infants being suckled. These are understandings in your mind that have died to their own understanding and become like children again. Jesus sees in your consciousness, and he sees infants being suckled. And he said to his disciples, these infants being suckled are like those who enter the kingdom. In saying 21, we just explained how that happens, and Jesus is explaining it himself here in saying 22. As often is the fact, Jesus gives one saying, and then the next saying sheds light on the first saying, the preceding saying. So he's saying that these infants being suckled, these are understandings in your consciousness that have died to themselves and become like children again. But now they're being suckled on the Christ child that is coming forth. These infants being suckled are like those who enter the kingdom. It's appointed unto man once to die, and to become like a child again. They said to him, shall we then, as children, enter the kingdom? Your understandings, one by one, as children, they are man understandings who receive the life of the breath of life, as Adam did. Adam became a man. Man was created in 6 days, received the breath of life. This is an understanding of God. It's created in the 6 days, receives the breath of life from God. But now that man must die to his understanding because it is too low, it is carnal, and be born again, and become like a child again, and then be suckled on spiritual things. And they said to him, shall we then, as children, enter the kingdom? Jesus said to them, when you make the two into one. He's telling you that his disciples are these understandings. Yes. The disciples of Jesus are your understandings, who die to themselves after they receive the breath of life and become like children again, and they become the disciples of Christ, Jesus. Now Jesus said to them, when you make the two one. This is often the case, that we have two understandings. We do have a carnal understanding as a level of a man. Plus, we are aware of a higher understanding, a spiritual understanding. So now we've got two understandings. There are two trees in paradise. These trees are levels of understanding, but one is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Good is of God, knowledge of God. Evil is carnal knowledge. So Jesus is saying here that this is the tree of knowledge of good and evil that stands in paradise. Paradise is the light. So you haven't been in the light. The man receives the breath of life. That is the light. But he has two understandings. He is of the tree of knowledge of good and evil that is in the light. And Jesus says you must get rid of the two. You must make the two into one. Well, how do you do that? You die to the lower understanding. The lower understanding dies, becomes like a child again, and then is converted into only the knowledge of God, the spiritual knowledge of God. So when you make the two into one, and you make the inside like the outside, okay, he's talking about you're making the spiritual, that's the inside of your consciousness, like the outside. That means you don't believe one thing inside and act differently on the outside. That is of the tree of two minds, the tree of duality, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You must stop that. You must, on the inside, in your spirituality, believe these spiritual things and act them outwardly as well. This is making the outside, the inside like the outside, and the outside like the inside. The above like the below. We're talking about spiritual above, the spiritual understanding, the good, the knowledge of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Good is God. There's none good but God. Good is spiritual. Evil is carnal. This is the above and the below. But you cannot be of two minds. You cannot carry two understandings and be saved. You must complete the conversion by making the above like the below, and the below like the above, and the male and female one and the same. This truly means male is understanding, female is desire. We've talked about this earlier. Many times we understand what we should do, but we desire something else. Jesus is saying to enter the kingdom, you understand you must worship God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. And you must desire to do that as well. This is making the male and the female into one and the same, so that the male is no longer male nor the female. Okay, there is no difference between understanding and desire. They are both one. You understand God. You must worship God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, and you desire to do so. The male and the female become one. Jesus told you in the beginning that for this reason the man should leave his mother and his father and shall cleave unto a wife, and they two shall become one. This is all he's saying here. As I said earlier, I think in the last video, of sayings from 8 or 9 to 16, that Jesus didn't say anything different in this compilation of sayings in the Gospel of Thomas than he said anywhere else. Every saying here is repeated in the Holy Scriptures for the Christians. And he says, when you fashion eyes in the place of an eye. What Jesus is saying is carnal people are one-sided. They see things through one perspective only. many perspectives. So when you understand that, then you've fashioned eyes in the place of an eye. And a hand in the place of a hand. Again, hand is a level of understanding, a consciousness. It depicts a certain amount of consciousness. Do you know, it is written that Christ was the hand of God. Now we know that Christ is wisdom, knowledge, understanding, a certain amount, a certain intensity that comes from God. And Christ was the hand of God. Well, humans also have their own hands, but it is not this thing with 5 digits on it. It is your perception of reality. It's your hand. So what Jesus is saying is you must create a new perception of reality. You must change your hand in the place of another hand, and the foot in the place of a foot, and a likeness in the place of a likeness. Again, as I said, with carnal people, when you get an understanding, you create an image. You might have an understanding what heaven is like, and in your mind's eye, you see a picture of that understanding. Well, this is the likeness you've created, but this is not your picture of heaven is not what heaven is, but you've created it because of your understanding. When you get a higher understanding, a spiritual understanding, you will create a new likeness in your mind's eye of what truly heaven is. Then you will enter the kingdom. Saying number 23, the Gospel of Thomas. Jesus said, I shall choose you 1 out of 1,000 and 2 out of 10,000, and they shall stand as a single one. Jesus is saying you have 10,000 thoughts, but only one is acceptable to him. You have 1,000 thoughts, only one is acceptable to him. You have 10,000 thoughts, only 2 are acceptable to him. The rest he rejects. But he will reap that 1 from the 1,000, that 2 from 10,000, and they will be both worshippers of God. They will love the Lord God with all their heart, all their soul, all their mind, and all their strength. Those 2 will be of one mind. They will be strictly dedicated to God and nothing else. That's the ones I will gather from your consciousness, out of the myriad of diverse thoughts that you produce in your consciousness. I believe that it's written that the average person produces something like 70,000 thoughts a day. So out of those thoughts, Jesus takes 1 from 1,000, 2 from 10,000, and they will be converted. They will be his disciples. And they will love the Lord God with all their heart, all their soul, all their mind, and all their strength. And those thoughts will enter the kingdom. What about the other thoughts? They're rejected. They have to die and stay in hell where they came from. Saying 24. His disciples said to him, show us the place where you are, since it is necessary for us to seek it. Now, where is Jesus at? Well, Jesus is at a certain level of consciousness. So his disciples are saying, show us. Now, it's important to understand that they have met him and walked with him in the earth. Jesus comes from heaven down to earth. So he has come down to their level, to the level of a man that has the breath of life. But that's not where he dwells. So they're saying to him, show us the place that you dwell, since it is necessary for us to seek it. And Jesus says, he said to them, whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. There is a light within a man of light. Okay, so what Jesus is telling them, there is a light within a man of light, and he lights up the whole world. If he does not shine, he is darkness. What Jesus is saying, that a man is an understanding. So if you have a spiritual understanding, it is filled with light. This is the Om, the light of God. Okay, this understanding, spiritual, has light in it. And if you get enough of these spiritual understandings, enough of these men of light, remember, the first man, Adam, was a living soul. But Adam has to die and be recreated. It is written, the first man, Adam, was a living soul. The second man, Adam, was a quickened spirit, was filled with light. The first man, Adam, had some light, a spark of light, the breath of life. But the second man, Adam, after the first died, became like a child again and was converted to spiritual. He had pure light. He was a quickened spirit like the angels. This is your understandings. Okay? So, Jesus is saying, whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. There is light within a man of light. A spiritual understanding has light, not just the breath of life. He is filled with light, and he lights up your whole consciousness. When you have enough understandings filled with light, there is light in your consciousness 24/7. You hear the Om, the sound of the energy of God. You carry the light of God. You are a light bearer. You carry that with your consciousness, in your energy, in your aura. Your conscious energy all around your body is in the light 24/7. You never leave it. This concludes sayings 17 to 24 in the Gospel of Thomas. Let's take a break now. I don't believe we should make these videos too long for one sitting. So I think 45 minutes to an hour is probably long enough for a video. So I will split these interpretations, the 113 of them, into shorter videos for your convenience. So if you wish to hear a longer video, you'll have to watch the second part and the third part and so on until you get through the interpretation videos of all the 113 sayings in the complete Gospel of